This is Andy B, the Get You Home show, only on Pure 24/7 radio. You were enjoying a little bit of Kenny Loggins just before the news. We have a guest before me. We met at Hand in Hand conference quite a few weeks back at this point. But hello, Gemma.
Hi, Andy. Nice to see you again.
Yes. Now, Hand in Hand, we've got to touch on this just a little bit. How many times have you been to the Hand in Hand conference over the years?
It's at least 3 times, I think. Yeah.
Because we went, 2025, we walked around, met some of the people. I thought, we'd love to be here. So we chatted with Ollie and Helen and the team. So we came and did live radio, which was great fun. But it's like nothing else. How would you describe the experience of Hand in Hand? Because it's, I think, beautifully unique.
It is. It's like a massive celebration, isn't it? So it sort of reminds me of one of those big confetti guns, bazooka guns, and you just can't help but have a smile on your face almost all of the time. I think it's phenomenal. The team are amazing, and I put so much energy and work into it. And what always encourages me is, even though it's full of people who are working in some really difficult situations with limited volunteers and resources, everybody's so positive and hopeful all the time.
Which is a bit, I think, is the beautifully unique element, because we do quite a lot of festivals, conferences, conventions, and there's varying degrees of support and care for the people who are on the exhibition stands and so on. And they're always cared for one way or another. But Hand in Hand does seem to be just next level care, which was beautiful.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? And it does make you feel like part of one family or part of one mission organisation. Really, you're all together doing the same thing, same purpose, same aims. It's really good. Yeah,
which is really great. Now, we met because you were there because of Truth Be Told. So just give us a really simple overview. What is Truth Be Told all about?
So Truth Be Told is a Christian storytelling organisation, and we help to connect people to one another and help to connect people to God. So yeah, our two charitable objectives are to advance the Christian faith and to promote social inclusion. So anyone who might be on the fringes of community for whatever reason, we help to bring them in through the power of story.
And storytelling is important. We're telling your story right now because we as a radio station love storytelling. It's such a powerful thing because it matters to everybody, I think, whether you even can understand the story of the development of the clutch. I don't know. Anyway, something like that. It's about the person telling the story. That's the bit I love. You don't have to have, technical knowledge or understanding of wherever they're working or their own story or the job or whatever. I've always said to my boys, just enjoy the person telling the story, because you will learn something. If nothing else, someone is passionate about something else.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And during the training that we give, I always ask what people's favourite stories are. And there's some themes and some familiar stories that come up time and time again. But always the golden thread that goes through it all is the person that you were with when you heard that story, or the person telling you that story. It's hardly ever from childhood, something that is just, I was sat in my bedroom by myself reading this book. It's hardly ever that. It's always, my mum or my grandma or my dad or my granddad or my sister or whoever it is, connecting you with a story. And I think nothing connects us together like anything else. It's just an amazing form of communication, and I feel very passionate about it. And with every twist and turn, there's more confirmation that it is just ever powerful, especially in an age where we're surrounded by things that are taking our attention visually all the time. To have somebody just tell you a simple story has suddenly become even more powerful than it ever has been.
In the last 6 months or so, I've spoken with so many organisations, and the one thing that seems to be consistent through them is the need to listen to other people as the start of whatever particular thing they're doing, whether it's working on the streets with people who might be drunk, or whether it's working with men in particular scenarios. It doesn't really matter what the story behind it is, but listening to somebody is really important. And then not just listening to them talk, but listening to their story. And that is in itself, without anything else happening, which may well be needed, that is so life transforming, because you're giving value and credence to somebody and saying, I actually want to listen to you and hear all that you want to say.
It is. It's massively validating. And I think it's wonderful to share fictional stories, parable stories, but it's also amazing to listen to other people's stories and see where they've come from and where they're going.
Now, truth be told, storytelling, how does that work in day to day? What is it whose stories are you telling? How are you telling them? Who are you telling them to?
So they're all stories that are based on stories in the Bible. So we're taking the methodology really of Jesus, who took the common, who took the familiar, and threw alongside a parallel to help his listeners see something fresh, see the kingdom of God in a new way, or see an injustice in a new way. And so we're really taking that principle and applying it today. So we would tell the parable of the lost sheep, but to help those of us who don't necessarily live in a farming community understand it a bit more, we might tell it about a zoo, and a zookeeper loses an animal, and then you go around the town trying to find the zoo animal. And then you say at the end, that's a story about a story in the Bible, where every story leads us on a journey to Jesus. Or we tell the parable of the prodigal son, about a boy and his dad who go to a football stadium, and instead of staying close by, as his dad had warned him to do because it was going to be very busy, grabs his ticket and runs off to the front of the stadium. And, there he wants to see the beginning of the match, but, actually he ends up far away from his dad, and he just wishes he was with his dad. And when he turns around, his dad's there running towards him. So things that we might not be able to identify with in our culture today in the Bible, we do what Jesus did and kind of recontextualize it so that we can connect something of our life to something of that moral, that principle, that meaning that Jesus was originally intending. And so we tell those kind of stories with little children and parents or preschoolers and older people in care homes. We tell those stories with asylum seekers and refugees who might have a really different view of who the God of the Bible is. We tell these stories with people with very low literacy who wouldn't be able to read the Bible, with children with learning difficulties or adults with learning disabilities. So anyone who might find themselves unable to connect with maybe a normal church service or opening the written word of God, we say, just let me tell you a story, and tell a simple story, connect it to God. And that might just whet their appetite and think, oh, something I hadn't realized, God loved me that much, or I was accepted, I was valued, I was heard or held, or whatever the truth is that day. So it's not the entirety of the word of God in any way, and we would never proclaim to be that, but it's just an initial starting point that helps people to break down some barriers, break down some walls, and might get them to a point where they're ready to listen a bit deeper, or get involved in a little bit more than they would have done ordinarily.
It does help. I mean, the whole farming thing. The guy went to chuck some seeds out on the floor, and some went onto the hard soil and the better soil, and it doesn't necessarily immediately mean masses to me. I don't do farming. I don't do gardening if I can help it. So trying to understand that particular parable, that story that we can read in the Bible, it does need sometimes a little bit of help from other people. You tell that in a farming community, they're there. They absolutely get every single word. They understand the concept so much more, which is why it's good to try and find, well, how else can we help you understand what it is that Jesus is saying?
Exactly. And there's a couple of verses in the Bible where Jesus is particularly saying, he says, to what shall I compare the kingdom of God? And as I read that verse, and as I kind of talk to people and teach people through that verse, I always imagine Jesus wondering, he's standing there with a group of listeners, thinking, what shall I compare the kingdom of God to? How can you really get it? I really want you to grasp this. So what shall I compare it to help you get it? And essentially that's what we're doing. What can I compare the parable of the lost son to, so that you will really get how much God loves you? So it's not the entire word of God, but it very much feels like we're walking in Jesus's footsteps by using that method of communication and that method of comparison and parallel and parable to help communicate in a fresh way.
Which is a bit I loved. Now, I wanted to talk about the one, I want to come back to all sorts of things, but the one bit you were talking about with me hand in hand, which I was especially drawn to, was how you're taking, in my own words, correct this, but you basically go with the toddler group into an old folks home and kind of bring the two generations together, and good stuff happens.
Yes, exactly. So it didn't exactly start there, truth be told. We started, I had a storytelling business, and a vicar a new vicar in a Church of England church said that he wanted some Christian content to revive a church playgroup. And so I wrote a set of 6 stories with different truths at the end that landed with different truths. I'm loved, I'm found, I'm accepted, I'm precious, I'm valued. And I always knew they had legs. And then we moved to Bournemouth, which is obviously a retirement community, and I live opposite a care home. And so I thought that those stories might really connect with the older people and the younger people. And some of the care homes that we work in are quite high level dementia care homes. And so to be able to talk in relatively simplistic stories through the agency of the children, so very much you're talking to the children, but from a dignity point of view, you really are kind of talking to the children, but by osmosis, all of those good things, those good truths are going in to everybody in the room. It's not just the older people, it's the carers and the parents as well. We use lots of props. We use a bag with lots of reminiscent items, things from charity shops, very tactile items. And we get the children to share those props with the older people, with their older friends. And we do some show and tell with them. So we get it might be that the older friends might bring something from their room that day that relates to the theme of the story, and they will share that with their little friends, and vice versa. So going back to your point about just that lovely sense of being listened to and heard, there is, an older person to listen to a little person who's got something to say, and they both benefit from that. That's just a win-win situation. And then we use this wonderful word called confelicity, which I came across when I was starting the charity, and it means taking joy in somebody else's joy. So if you imagine that the parent right in the middle there is watching their little one bring joy to an older person, that parent is absolutely full to bursting with a sense of joy as well. In a time of life that can feel a little bit perpetual and a bit incessant and a bit repetitive, and you're wondering, why you're there and what your identity is. To watch your little person bringing so much joy to somebody else who needs it is an amazing thing. So it's just this beautiful circle of benefit and contribution. Everyone's contributing in that circle, and everybody's benefiting. Everybody has to be there. If one of those links of that chain is not there, it doesn't work. So everybody is needed. No one's showering mercy over anyone else. Everyone's just having a great time together. And one of the phrases we use is it's just normal family life. So you just come as you are. If you're in a bit of a grumpy mood, whether you're an older person, a parent, or a little person, that's absolutely fine. We're just doing normal family life together. And yeah, the relationships we've seen built throughout the years are just beautiful. And just having this kind of structure and this familiar story and this familiar flow to the session means everyone feels safe and everyone can just join in as much as they want and have a lovely time. It's incredible.
Which is beautiful, and that's part that really, I suppose, sucked me into what you were talking about, because I have got such a passion for how wrong it is in life that people go towards their retirement age. They're 55, maybe they're not retired, maybe 60. Retirement's not that far away, and yet in society today, well, you're retiring. Oh, well, you can't do much. Oh, well, you're past it now, aren't you? And I've heard people say that, and it gets something inside me, which is not such a good thing, because it's just so wrong. Because we've got all these amazing experiences of life and experience and so much goodness that is sort of tossed to one side. Oh, well, you're too old now, which is just utter nonsense. Because actually, the more this world goes as it is, the more we need the older people to come along and say, hey, do you know, here's some wisdom. We've already done what you're trying to work out to do. Let me give you some knowledge. Let me give you some experience. Let me give you some wisdom. Because there's so much to learn. And it does frustrate me when I hear people say, oh, well, they're too old now. What could they contribute to society? Everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And parents today, I mean, I know it myself. One of the reasons I went into that care home was because I, could really do with some more older people. And, I want that kind of relationship from people who are older than me. And we live in quite fragmented, dispersed communities these days. We don't all live on each other's doorsteps with grandparents and great grandparents around the corner. And so to have just a vehicle to be able to make friends with people from different generations is really valuable for the parents as much as it is the children and the older people. So yeah, they've got so much to give. And I just remember kind of in those initial stages of the project, just being utterly convinced. And it's so obvious when I even say it out loud, but they are just you and me, but older. They've just been blessed with more days than we have. I mean, that's the only difference. So they really are so valuable to us, and will have been so integral to their jobs, their communities, their church, their family. They will have been absolutely at the heart and centre of things. And when you actually take the time to talk to people about their jobs, one of the first chaps that came along to truth be told was a carpenter for the palace. So, and I kind of said, is this the dementia? But no, it was fully validated. That's actually what he was. And you hear that story so many times. Obviously, you meet retired politicians, you meet teachers, you meet midwives, you meet people with incredible life stories. But like you say, they often just get kind of pushed to one side because they're older or they're slower. And I think the thing that always really is stark to me. I look at my diary and I think, wow, there's lots going on, and can I fit that in, and can we rearrange this and that and all the rest of it, and pickups and drop-offs and meetings, and you'll be the same, and I'm sure many of the listeners will as well. But can you imagine a time when that diary is full, when it's empty, when there's nothing in it? And in fact, it's so empty you don't need a diary. January comes round and you don't need a calendar and you don't need a diary anymore. I mean, we can't imagine that. But if we're blessed with enough days, that will happen to us. And so to have something on a Wednesday morning when you know the children are going to come in, it feels really profound to have something that is regular, that they love, that they enjoy. And week in, week out, we get feedback from the care homes to say it's just the feedback they get is amazing, and it's the best day of their week. And the carers get to see the residents more like themselves than at any other time, because there's a purpose for them. They'll help the little ones put their coats on again, or they'll pick something up off the floor, or when it's parachute time, they'll stand up and they'll woof the parachute, or they'll contribute to a story. And it's not in a patronising way at all. It's just, like I say, being part of family life. So you get up and you help. And so that gives a great sense of purpose for people, which often they feel like they've lost.
Storytelling. How did storytelling start for you? Where did you get into that? I know you mentioned the minute this. Oh, can you create this content? But back a bit further, how did you get with such passion into storytelling?
I think it started way back when I was little, and I think I mentioned this at the Hand in Hand conference when I was 7, and my mum had recorded The Magic Faraway Tree on some cassette tapes. It was my favourite story. And so she sat and recorded that on a little kind of 80s cassette tape with a little microphone. And so I listened to it again and again and again as a cassette tape. But then she sadly died when I was 7, leukemia, very suddenly. And so that cassette tape became my everything, really. That's the one thing I still have. If the house was burning down, I'd take the cassette tape with me. That's, her voice. I don't have many memories of her, but hearing her voice now is still really, really precious. So I knew that when I had children, that was going to be what I wanted to do with them, was to read books and read stories. And I really, I guess, found a sense of healing through doing that when my daughter was born 18 years ago now. And so, I absolutely love telling stories with her. And then was asked to, I wanted to be an actress. That was my big thing in life, but became a Christian at about 17 and realised maybe acting wasn't the most important thing in my life, and so sort of put that dream on the back burner and worked for a publishing company instead. Then later on I thought I really would like to do something on stage, and so told a story to a big multicultural church in London, and it just felt like it was one of those things I could do. Hadn't realised I could do it, but I think I came off and everyone thought you can do that, and I thought that myself. And just so happened to be able to afford to be able to, put down work for a while and give up that kind of publishing world and start a storytelling business. And think one of my first commissions was this toddler group piece, and then, truth be told, started a couple of years later.
How long's Truth Been Told been as it is today?
2019, we started in January 2019. We started a pilot group in the care home opposite. I started that story group in the toddler group in 2016. So I guess there's flavours of it for about 10 years. And we became a charity in August 2020. Obviously, the worst possible project you could have thought of during pandemic, bring some sort of sticky, grubby children into a care home. So we did do quite a lot online. But interestingly, then the care home said that it was one of the few activities that did work online, because there was such a sense of, interactivity. So it got, I did quite a lot of things behind the scenes during that time, and finally we made it back into a care home.
Let's go back to faith, because you talked about becoming a Christian. Obviously, you talked about the tragic loss of your mum at an early age, storytelling. But where did Christianity enter your life?
So I decided when I was about 16, my dad had gone on an Alpha course, and he said, "Oh, Gem, you really should give this a go. It's there's something here." And I had thought for a long time, what is this about? I wasn't from a Christian home at all. But I went with the question, is my mum in heaven? That was how my dad told me that she'd died. He had said, your mum's gone to heaven. And so I thought, I need to know if this heaven is a real place. And I remember walking through the doors of Biggin Hill Christian Fellowship and feeling like I was home. It almost imagine the slippers by the front door, just take your shoes off, put your slippers on. Here's a nice cup of tea. And I suddenly realised that there was this family, this extended family. It didn't matter if you were blood related or not. You were family. You were welcome. And it was week 3 of the Alpha course. Who is Jesus? And the person leading the table said, "I think you're ready to pray that prayer." And I said, "Yeah, I think I am." So it means I'm not entirely sure 17 is the most common age to kind of give everything up and become a Christian. But in those kind of teenage years, having grown up quite young, I'd managed to have some fun. So I definitely felt ready to give that up and become a Christian. So, and it's obviously a decision I've never regretted. It was the biggest turning point in my life.
So acting was something you wanted to do. I mean, I guess in many ways with storytelling, you get to do that quite a bit in a very specific context. How far did you really want to go with the acting? I mean, I know obviously Christianity came in for you, but how much of a loss was that for you when you thought, no, that's not for me?
Yeah, I think by then I had it didn't feel like a loss. I think what I'd found in Jesus, what I'd found through the church, was so fulfilling. It was at just the right time when I was looking around universities, and I'd gone and visited a few places, and I thought, I just don't think this is for me. And I didn't know it then. But I think you do see that, now can see that golden thread that God was weaving through my life, and it didn't feel like too much of a loss. But I do realise that all of those passions and those desires and gifts, I think, that he'd put in me from a young age, he had completely other plans for that, which, like you say, I do get some great opportunities to still tell stories and speak and give presentations and tell stories in big contexts, all for his glory. So it's wonderful how he's used it. So I don't feel like it's a loss at all now. I get some great opportunities.
And yet, you use the word golden thread. I often talk in a very similar way on these interviews. You look back and you think, how did I not see at the time how important that was that I didn't do that, or I did take that decision? And at the time, of course, you don't. I mean, hindsight is brilliantly useful. Never, it's like, great, why couldn't I know that? And yet you look back and you can see for your own life, obviously storytelling, acting would have been storytelling one way or another. And here you get to do that in such a beautiful, wonderful way. But that thread of God it does, it sort of, in the most wonderful of ways, it's never a straight journey, not ever, and yet you can always trace back where God's been behind.
Yeah, you can. It's so wonderful, isn't it, to see? And I do a kind of guest lecture at Moorlands Bible College once a year to the first years. And they get lots of different people to come in and speak to the students there about different kind of Christian mission pathways you can go on. And mine really is just saying, what is your golden thread of purpose? How does God show you um, what you're good at, who you're connected with, what He's got for you? How can you notice the little tiny glimmers of gold throughout your life so far and what He might be doing in the future? And then I kind of show a picture of the Cinnamon Network recommended projects page, because each one of those people working or heading up who founded social action projects like Truth Be Told, there will be this passion and this burden that God has put in you and in you alone, for the people who don't have a voice, or the marginalized, those people who don't ordinarily get heard. There'll be a unique burden that God's put in your heart, and how can you recognize what that unique burden is for you? For me, it was people, in care homes, but even that has kind of grown and expanded to people who are marginalized in the community for any reason. And so it's wonderful to kind of get the opportunity now to help other people sift what might it be that God's doing in your life. Because the possibilities are endless when you think about all the social action projects and the kind of the capital that Christians have in their communities today. There isn't a walk of life that the church isn't helping with, and that people haven't stepped into and said, I'm going to do something about this. This isn't right. This is an injustice. I can help. And there's some really very niche projects and things that you'd think, I can't believe that that's even needed, but God has put a unique burden in one person's heart to go and make a difference and change their community. And then that spreads and develops. It's an amazing world to be a part of. I guess you get to meet lots of those people as well. It's quite remarkable.
It is one of my greatest joys, privileges. I do get to meet so many folk who have been called to do whatever it is they're doing. And I love the journeys of, one day I wanted to be an actor, and then, I didn't. I went this way, but actually I look back and, hey, that's quite a useful skill 15, 20, 50 years later, whatever it might be. I love that stuff. And it happens so often. And the thing is, if you're not careful, you look around the world and think, oh, very dark, very depressing. There's no hope left. Everything's dark. We're all going to die. And you realize, and this is my joy, I meet all these people who are saying, yeah, but there's also life. And here's what I'm doing to help these people find life, find hope, find joy, find peace. And whether it's through storytelling or so many of that. I mean, I think we've done nearly 200 of these specific interviews alone. And that's 200 stories. That's 200 ministries nearly, or projects or organizations where people are making a difference in their community, in the world. They are changing the lives of people for better, because primarily they take the time to listen to a problem and think, how can we solve some of this problem? Not all of it. No one can do that. It's ridiculous to think you can, but you can all do one thing. And if we all do that one thing with passion, it's amazing what can happen.
It is, you're absolutely right. And what I have realised more recently is God, put this passion in my heart, and He will have done exactly the same with all the people that you're talking about, because He wants those people to make a difference in their community, but because He passionately loves me and you and all of those people as well. And so what He does in our life and our heart through these ministries is beautiful as well. And so when I look back and think about where that kind of passion for storytelling started, he knew that He wanted to create something in me and bring something to life through me that would be deeply healing in my own life. And what an amazing, compassionate, loving, adoring Father would do that. He doesn't just do it for the benefit of others. He does it for the benefit of me and you. And that's just a beautiful thing.
It's mind-blowing is what it is. It's wonderful. So, truth be told, today, you've gone through a journey of storytelling, realizing, hey, I can do this quite well. And then you started working, one of the things you've been doing is working with younger and older folk, bringing them together. What's Truth Be Told doing these days now?
Well, in about 10 days' time, truth be told, is getting on a plane and going to Taipei in Taiwan, because there's actually a project church out there who are using truth be told to teach English and share the gospel in their community. So that's really exciting to have, putting our feet in international soil and doing some global stuff. We've got a project running in Ghana, and so that it just feels like there's a real, and we're planning some more international training with another kind of international collaborator. So just recognizing that 2/3 of the world are oral learners. So even if you were to translate the Bible, the written word of God, into all of the languages in the world, 2/3 of the world would still need you to tell them the truth, or for them to hear the truth rather than to read it. And so I feel that God is giving us a real international heart and an international stage to be able to use this method of communication for the benefit of those people all over the world who will not hear the word of God, won't hear the name of Jesus unless we're able to share stories about him. And so God's been bringing people to us to kind of collaborate and talk with. So that's really over the next year. We're looking for some parable patrons to support us. We're starting an individual giving campaign. We're launching that in a couple of weeks. Looking for 99 parable patrons for the sake of the one. So we're really excited to see who might come and join with us and just be on our team, cheering us along and helping us to fund the work that we do to be able to have people find God.
I at school, 16 to 18, we call them A levels in the UK, and I was studying Christian theology. And I remember one of our teachers came in and said, did you know there are 3 testaments? There's the Old Testament and there's the New Testament. And I'm thinking, where's this going? And then there's the Oral Testament. And we learned about the Oral Testament, which I hadn't ever considered. And the Oral Testament, as they went on to explain after my heart stopped beating quite so hard, thinking, what are you talking about? Is the period between kind of the Old Testament and the New Testament where people would tell the Bible in stories. Photocopies, emails didn't exist. So they'd be around the campfire as very large families, and someone would tell the story of the book of Job or the book of Samuel or the book of the Psalms, and they would be recounting these, and that's the oral testament. So actually, in terms of what you're doing, it's quite nicely the same thing. And there is this sort of, not quite a third testament, so you hear what I'm saying, but there is this third part that we kind of forget, where people would simply repeat the Bible because it was memorized, because that's how because you couldn't write down, you couldn't afford paper, couldn't afford a pen. How do you then transmit? How do you communicate it? Well, you repeat it in story form, which is what they would do around the campfire. And I loved learning about the Oral Testament as literally people speaking the Bible as a way of communicating the Bible to other people.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's so relevant today. I mean, the person that I'm working with lives in a country who, even to have a Bible, to own a Bible, is incredibly dangerous. So you may very well be able to read, but to have a Bible in your house is a dangerous thing to do. And so, if you're going to be effective in sharing God's love with other people, then you need to be telling them. Without sort of written evidence of talking to them about it and sharing stories, and different rural communities. The possibilities are endless, and I'm sure your other guests who've talked about their social action projects would say the same thing. God gives you this tiny little seed right at the beginning, and you think, okay, God, I'll go with that. I'll plant that little tiny seed. I'll write my 6 stories. I'll tell them at a toddler group, and then before you know it, sort of 6, 7, 8 years later, you're connecting with people all over the world and helping them to spread the gospel and connect people together for God's glory. I mean, it's phenomenal. As well as lots of ESOL work in this country, working with people with low literacy and working with asylum seekers and refugees. We're just starting a project in a C of E school that's 95% Muslim, who absolutely love hearing about different faiths, and so it's just going everywhere.
Which is fab. Do you have a particular story that you really like to tell? Perhaps one that gets the best sort of responses from the folk that are listening, or are they all equally brilliant?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, put me on the spot there. Do you mean an actual parable story, or do you mean a story about an impact
One of the ones
life
that
that's
you're
been
using.
changed?
Yeah, one of the ones that
Sorry,
you're using. One of the stories that you use,
one
and
of
then
the
I'd like
stories.
to change would be great.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll tell you a story about a little elephant, and his name is Blue. And this little elephant has been having to walk at the back of the line of elephants in Zimbabwe for a number of years now. There's always a mum at the front of the line of elephants, and there's always a mum at the back of the line of elephants as they go on their trip each year, each summer to find water. And Blue every year is desperate to go at the front of the line of elephants. He's got high aspirations and he's excitable and he absolutely loves adventure. And every year he asks his mum, please, can I go at the front? And every year his mum says, no, you stay at the back with me. And every year he says, no, mum, please, can I go at the front? And every year his mum says, no, you won't like it. You'll be too busy. It's some kind of elephant at the front. You're not going to feel comfortable. But he keeps going and keeps going. And eventually one year when he asks, his mum says, okay, go on then. And he shoots ahead through all of the elephant legs and past all of the elephant bottoms, through all of the dust. And he gets to the front with the mother elephant at the front. Wow, it's an amazing, incredible vista. He can see everything. He's having a wonderful day. He knows exactly where he's going. He can, see the water ahead, but just feel a little bit different. And yeah, the elephants aren't quite the same at the front as they were at the back. And maybe things aren't quite so rosy as he thought they would be. And then he manages to kick a stone and hurt his foot. He ends up lying on the floor and no one's helping around him. And the elephants keep trudging past and over him and round him. And he manages to get himself up and finds himself getting further and further back when he was right at the front. And as he's getting further and further back, he realizes that he's going to have to face his mum soon and wondering what his mum's going to think and what his mum's going to say. And, eventually, finally, he does get to the back and he's just about sees his mum and his mum sees him. And as his mum sees him, his mum comes running towards him. They entwine their trunks and his mum is so delighted to see him. And he says, sorry, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you in the first place. Why did I go ahead? Will you forgive me? And Blue's mum said, of course I'll forgive you. You're so special to me. And Blue stays with his mum, exactly where he belongs. And then we tell our guests to put their hands on their hearts and take a deep breath. And listen up, because that's a story about a story in the Bible where every story leads us on a journey to Jesus. And Jesus tells the real story about a son who runs off and gets into trouble and comes back and his father receives him because he knows that we're really good at running off and getting distracted and getting lost. And he wants us to know that he will always rescue us. He's always there because we are so, so special to him. And that's the truth of the story. I am special. You are special. We are special.
I love that one. I do claps, but it wouldn't sound so good through the microphone. I really like that one. I thought it was going to a different direction, so that was great. I love that one. So, where have you seen this really change your life? Then, where have you seen that?
I mean, we've seen it time and time again in the care home with the residents. We've seen it with a young mum who came along to a care home group and really was had no idea about church and didn't know about God, and then just through these very, very simple stories, she hadn't had any church background, she didn't know about faith, but she knew that something was lacking. Just through the agency of the children listening to stories just like that, very, very simple stories, she realized that actually God did think she was special and she was included in that. And then she became a Christian. She got baptized. She ended up part of the local church and helping with the project and inviting her friend along. And it just grows and grows and grows. And then the residents have similar stories. Maybe some have had difficult bringings or experiences with church, but because this is such a natural and easy, welcoming, anyone can get involved kind of project, they realize that actually the important thing is that God really does love you and his church is just a family. And those bad experiences don't need to be the final experience. And then we see people who of a Muslim background who have a very different idea of who God might be. And so to understand that the God of the Bible is a relational God who loves you and wants to listen to you and hears your prayers and wants a relationship with you is absolutely mind-blowing. So there's all these little first steps, breaking down the barriers and seeing people realise, who God is and what He feels about them is that's the beautiful thing.
So you're flying off other side of the world, I guess, fairly soon, which is going to be interesting and fairly exciting. You've got the amazing work you're doing now with toddlers and older folk as well, which makes me very happy to see those two generations brought together. It's such a good thing. Have you got anything else coming up for you for Truth Be Told in the next few weeks? Or is that enough? Is that enough going on?
No, we're launching a new project in a school in quite a deprived area where the storytellers, in fact, have a low literacy. So I'm going to be training them in completely orally so that they can then tell the stories to their local school children who are coming to school who aren't school ready. So they're going to be learning more words and learning, about literacy through these kind of hope-filled stories. So that's a really beautiful project that I'm excited about. And as I say, just then really trying to get some people to support us and to jump in and be one of those 99 parable patrons. That's what we're gunning for over the next few weeks.
I like that one. Yes, very good reason to do that. If people want to get more involved with what you're doing, whether they want to become one of your parable patrons, I love that. Or just generally find out more about what you're doing or how they can get involved, or you can support them. How do they best do that?
Yeah, so our website's truthbetold.org.uk, and anyone's welcome to drop me an email. I'd love to hear from anyone. If anything that I've been talking about is of interest, people want to go to a group, want to start a group themselves, want to become a parable patron, just hear more about the work that we do. And that is Gemma with a G, truthbetold.org.uk.
Gemma, thank you. Now, I know when you were chatting with Stephen just before you came on with me, you were saying Stevie Wonder is somebody whose music you appreciate. So I've got a song. Did you want to say why this particular song, which I randomly chose, in a sense, is important?
Yes. Yeah. So me and my husband, 23 years ago in November, came out of the church to this song. So it's, you were very wise to choose it. It was a good one.
We do try. Stevie Wonder coming your way.
Here at Pure 247 Radio, we've had the privilege of speaking to some amazing people with some amazing stories.
I was about 5k off the coast paddling, and I was watching this storm on the land, and it literally hit a mountain, and rather than just going over the top of it, just turned and just came straight at me. You can't stay on the board in that instance, so I literally am jumping off the back of the board. I've got everything tethered down on the board, and I'm just holding on to the back of the board.
As I walked in, there was a fight going on the floor. There was a police sergeant sailing over the desk to help with restraining somebody. And the doors were clanging shut, all the big metal gates, and there were alarms going off and radios. And I felt this most enormous peace come over me because I realised that this is where God wanted me to spend my career behind bars.
It was like a baptism of fire, and it was like the most socially deprived council wards in Britain. And then we were going into schools, and then kids were coming to the gigs, but then knocking on my door at night, and I was out there playing football till 11:30 p.m. at night, 12 o'clock, feeding kids, running youth clubs.
If you've missed an inspiring conversation and want to catch up, or you'd like to revisit a brilliant interview, you can. Our interviews are available on YouTube and podcast, so you can always catch up anytime you like. Search for Pure 247 Radio wherever you get your podcasts, or find our YouTube channel at Pure 247 Radio, or head over to www.pure247radio.org/catch up.